The wind howled across the mesa as the baby cried sharp, shrill alive. She wasn't. Face down in the dust, her dress soaked in blood, her hands slack ones still reaching toward the bundle she'd barely glimpsed before the world went dark. The others were long-gone riders who hadn't waited for death to finish its work. Buzzards circled overhead low and bold, and that's when he stepped from the shadows. Paint smeared across his chest, a bone knife at his hip. His eyes dark as storm clouds locked onto her body, then the child. He didn't speak. He just moved fast and sure toward life. Subscribe now because tomorrow's story will haunt you even deeper. You'll need it. But before that, let me take you to the day it all began. The town of Dry Creek wasn't on any map that mattered. A sagging line of buildings clung to a sun-baked road like teeth in an old man's jaw, crooked yellowed, and on the verge of falling out. The dust here didn't just settle, it stayed. It coated windows, lined lungs, and filled the silence that hung heavier than the heat. And silence was something she knew too well. They called her Mercy, though no one remembered why. Maybe her mother had hoped she'd be spared the cruelty of the world. If so, it hadn't worked. Mercy had been an outcast in Dry Creek since the day she stopped being someone's wife and started being someone's warning. Her house stood at the edge of town past the stables just before the red earth dropped off into canyons and vulture-haunted cliffs. It was a one-room place with a crooked door and a window that didn't quite shut. Most nights she sat by the window and watched the town lights dim one by one. Nobody ever waved, nobody ever came. The rumors had done their work long ago. She's got death trailing her like a shadow, folks whispered. Saw her talking to the wind once, I swear. That limp ain't from no accident. Something took a piece of her. They weren't all wrong. Mercy walked with a slow, dragging step. Her right leg bent just enough to mark her as different. The scar on her jaw didn't help a pink gash that curled like a smile gone wrong. But it was the silence that bothered people most. She didn't speak much. And when she did, her voice came out soft and crooked, like it didn't belong to her anymore. Some said she'd gone deaf after the fire. Others said she'd gone mad. Both had some truth to them. The fire had taken her husband. Their cabin had caught in the middle of the night. No warning, no way out. She'd crawled out alone, burned and gasping, her belly already swollen with the child who would never meet his father. The weeks that followed passed in pieces. Ash fever, a funeral she didn't attend. People didn't know what to do with her after that, so they stopped doing anything. The preacher came once, told her it was time to move on. She stared at him until he stopped talking. The next Sunday, he didn't mention her at all. Even the children kept their distance. They'd once dared each other to toss rocks at her steps until she opened the door and looked at them. Not angry, not sad, just hollow. That was worse somehow. They never came back. The only sound in her life came from the wind and the creek. That barely trickled anymore. She kept to herself, mending torn clothes, patching leaks, waiting for what she wasn't sure. Then came the letters. They started showing up 2 weeks before her due date, folded tight and tucked beneath her door, always without a name. The first one said, I know what they did. The second, he wasn't alone in that cabin. The third, they'll come for you next. She didn't tell anyone. Who would listen? She burned the notes in the fireplace and tried not to think about what they meant. But at night she started hearing hoofbeats she couldn't place, footsteps on the gravel that stopped before reaching her porch. Sometimes she'd wake with the feeling that someone had been in the room close enough to touch, but too cruel to help. If this is breaking your heart already, you haven't seen the worst yet. Tap subscribe. I've got another truth waiting for you tomorrow. But even with the fear, the loneliness remained worse. Loneliness was its own kind of cruelty, slow, relentless, and polite enough to knock before devouring you. She took to walking the edge of town at dusk just to feel the illusion of people nearby. Nobody ever greeted her. They'd cross the street or stare too long or pull their children close. And still she walked. Maybe because the ache in her legs distracted from the ache in her chest. By the 9th month, the pain came in waves. At first, she thought it was the baby turning pressing. But something felt wrong. Lower, heavier, like her bones were being twisted from the inside. She tried to see the town doctor, but his wife met her at the door with tight lips and a Bible clutched to her chest. We're not involved, the woman said, and neither should you be. Mercy stood there for a full minute before turning around. She gave birth alone. But that's not the part that hurts the most. The part that hurts is this. She screamed for help when it began. She screamed until her throat tore raw. Her window stayed dark. Her door stayed shut. And the last thing she saw before passing out was the shadow of a rider watching from the edge of the canyon. Before we dive into the story, just a quick note. Amber atoned the voice behind this narration. If you enjoy how it sounds, let me know in the comments so we can keep the same voice in future videos. The bleeding stopped 2 days after they left her. That alone should have killed her. But something stronger than death, maybe spite, maybe instinct, kept her clinging to this world. She didn't remember much of that night, just the sound of hooves, a soft grunt, a warmth against her back when everything else had gone cold. She woke to the smell of juniper smoke and rawhide. At first she thought she'd crossed over. The sky was wrong, bluer, deeper. The sun filtered through pine needles instead of dust. She wasn't in Dry Creek anymore. She was somewhere beyond. Then she heard breathing, human-controlled watching. She turned her head slowly. Every joint screamed. He sat by the fire, sharpening a piece of bone. Not a knife exactly, but something older. His eyes flicked to hers when she moved, not startled, not curious. Just present Apache. She'd heard the stories like everyone else, that they vanished into rock, that they could track wind, that they slit throats in the dark without sound. But this man wasn't a ghost or a threat. He looked like someone who had seen too much to be afraid anymore. He didn't ask her name, didn't offer his. Instead, he handed her water and tore a strip of cloth to clean the blood from her hands. She watched him work, dazed and half dreaming. He had a scar across his brow, a silver ribbon of skin, like something had tried to split him open and failed. They didn't speak that first day. They didn't have to. Words would have broken something. Mercy slept. When she woke again, her baby was beside her, swaddled in deerskin, breathing alive. She cried for the first time since the fire. The third night they sat across the fire from each other. She was stronger now enough to sit upright enough to ache in more places than she could count. "You should have left me," she said. Her voice cracked. He didn't look away. "You weren't dead." Silence stretched between them again. It wasn't awkward. It was earned. She studied his hands. Steady, scarred, skilled. "Why help me?" He paused before answering. "I buried a wife once. She was pregnant." Mercy didn't ask more. Some grief doesn't need to be explained. She didn't ask about his tribe or his name, or why he risked everything to pull her from that patch of dirt when everyone else had turned away. Instead, she told him about the town, about the letters, about the way they'd looked at her, like she'd lit the match herself. "You still trust too much," he said. She almost laughed. "I don't trust anything anymore." He just gave her a long, slow look, like he knew better, like maybe he saw something she couldn't see herself. And for the first time in months, she didn't feel broken, just unfinished. They moved camp on the 5th day. He never told her why, but Mercy noticed the signs. He kept checking the ridgeline, listening longer at night. He'd vanish for hours and return with rabbit or quail, his face drawn tight. One morning she found him packing up in silence. "What is it?" she asked. "Smoke south," her heart sank. Dry Creek. He wouldn't say if he thought they were looking for her. But that night he taught her how to move through trees without snapping twigs, how to follow water uphill to find cleaner springs, how to walk with a knife in her hand without looking like she had one. The baby never cried much. Maybe he understood the danger too. On the 10th night, they reached a high bluff overlooking the valley. Below them, Dry Creek sat small and quiet like a toy town abandoned in the dust. He watched it for a long time. "You gonna go back?" he asked. Mercy's lips tightened. "What for?" "To bury the part of you that still waits for them to change." She looked at him, then really looked his face in profile, half lit by moonlight, the shadows tucked into his jaw like secrets. "You see me different than they do," she whispered. He nodded once. "I see you. What if someone saw you for who you are, not what you carry? Subscribe, one day that story might be yours too." Word travels even in silence. A trader from downriver spotted them near the river bend and took news back to town. "She's alive, ain't alone." That was all it took. By the end of the week, eyes narrowed when her name was spoken. The blacksmith loaded his shotgun. The preacher spoke of unnatural alliances. "She's got an Apache protecting her now," someone hissed. "Or controlling her," someone else said. But it wasn't just fear, it was guilt. They'd left a mother to die. That kind of sin festers unless it's buried under something worse. Blame, so they blamed her again. A month passed, then two. She learned how to track deer scat, how to make salve from pine resin, How to red cloud shapes the way some read tea leaves. Her limp never faded, but her body grew strong again. Her spirit too, though it didn't feel that way at first. She still cried sometimes, but now she cried with someone that changed everything. The man she still didn't know his name carved her a bow, taught her how to notch it. When she asked why, he simply said, "In case I'm not there." They didn't talk about the future that felt dangerous. But one night after the baby had drifted to sleep beside her, she reached across the fire and placed her hand over his. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, just sat there letting her touch something human for the first time in what felt like forever. And in that moment, Mercy knew whatever came next, she wasn't facing it alone anymore. They came at dawn like cowards do. Mercy had woken early that morning, stirred by a shift in the wind too, still too silent. Even the birds held their breath. She was halfway to the stream with the baby swaddled against her chest when she saw the glint sunlight catching on a rifle barrel. Then another and another. 3 men, town men faces she knew too well, Eli Cormac, George the stable hand, and the preacher's son with his father's self-righteous scowl. They stepped from the tree line with their guns drawn, pretending not to see the infant in her arms. "Don't move," Eli said, voice steady, too calm. "We don't want the child." Mercy froze. Her knees went weak, but she didn't fall. "Back away from the camp hands where we can see them." She backed away slowly, shielding the baby with her body. "Why?" she asked. The preacher's son sneered. "You made your choice, Mercy, sleeping with a savage, hiding out like some outlaw. That ain't the kind of mother Dry Creek wants back. I didn't ask you to want me." Didn't matter. People got scared, said it was time to fix what should have stayed dead. They waited until her Apache had gone to hunt. She realized it then. Someone had told them. Someone who'd seen the camp, recognized her face, and gone running with secrets on their tongue. She had no time to fight, no time. The plead they knocked her down, took the baby and tied her wrists, said they'd bring the child back where it belonged. Said she was lucky they didn't leave her for the buzzards again. The last thing she saw before they dragged her away was the fire still burning at the camp unattended, like her heart, like her life. They locked her in the church cellar dirt floor, one window. No light, no child. She screamed for hours, then sat in the dark and whispered lullabies to herself until her throat gave out. She didn't know what day it was when the door creaked open. She didn't look up, didn't have the strength. Boots stepped onto the stone, then the softest sound. Leather touching skin, his hand on her cheek, warm, real. She broke, not in fear and relief. "You came back," she rasped. He didn't speak, just untied her wrists and lifted her gently as if she were something precious, not broken, not lost. Just hurt he didn't carry her, like a hero. He helped her walk, staggering through the edge of town in darkness, staying to the alleys and brush. She couldn't stop shaking. "They took him," she whispered. "The baby, they said, I know," he said softly. And something about the way he said it, not panicked, not angry, just steady, wrapped itself around her, like a blanket. They reached the edge of town before the world tilted. Her body gave out, her legs collapsed beneath her, and this time she didn't try to stop it. She sank into snow-cold, soft, unforgiving. He didn't speak, he just sat beside her, not to pull her up, not to say, "Get over it," he just waited. And in that silence, something cracked open inside her. "I was so sure they wouldn't come back," she said through chattering teeth. "After what they did, after what they saw, I thought maybe they'd forget. Maybe I could matter again, just not to them." He looked at her, and not with pity, not with fear, just there. "They were never going to see you," he said. "They only see what scares them." She laughed bitterly. "So what does that make me?" He leaned in, voice low and clear, "Something they'll never understand. And that scares the hell out of them." They slept under the trees that night. No fire, no food, just frost gathering in their lashes. He kept one arm around her as she slept, more for comfort than warmth. When she startled awake just before dawn, he didn't ask why. He just handed her the knife she'd learned to use weeks before. She understood the message. "We go together now, always." The child was being held by the preacher's wife, safe for now, swaddled in a church blanket, too clean, too quiet. Mercy watched from behind the trees, her blood boiling under her skin. "I want him back," she said, voice flat cold. "We'll get him," the Apache replied. "You don't have to. I do. That was it. No grand declarations, just quiet allegiance." They waited until nightfall. She walked in first alone, her face, bare hair, tangled. A torn ribbon tied to her wrist like a flag. The preacher's wife gasped. The men who'd stolen her boy stood slowly from the pew's hands near their weapons. "You shouldn't be here," Eli said. "I'm not staying," Mercy replied. "Then what I came to take back what's mine." The baby resting in a makeshift cradle by the altar opened his eyes. And then the window shattered. Her Apache stepped through the smoke of the burning torch he'd tossed outside. Not charging, not shouting, just present like judgment. No blood was spilled that night, but something broke in Dry Creek. A silence heavier than stone settled in the room. And when Mercy left baby in her arms, no one stopped her. No one even moved. They didn't go back to the old camp. They didn't go far either. Just enough distance for the cold to be clean, not cruel. Enough to feel their own breath in the trees. He set up shelter while she nursed the child. Her hands still shook, but not from fear, from release, from finally believing it might be over. Later that night, she sat beside him near a new fire, knees touching silence. "Easy. Why didn't you try to fix me?" she asked. He glanced at her. "You weren't broken." She smiled, a real one this time. "Then why stay?" His answer was so simple, it stopped her heart for a beat, "Because I wanted to." Not because he pitied her, not because he saw her as something to rescue, but because he saw her, all of her, and chose her anyway. They thought she was broken, but someone saw gold in the ashes. Subscribe, I promise you, tomorrow's story will prove love still lives out here. The fire was different now, not the blaze that ruined her, not the kind that swallowed walls or scorched skin. This fire was steady, controlled. It danced quietly in the stone pit outside the little shack they'd built with their own, as it had taken months, but they did it together. A one-room cabin nestled into the tree's walls, made from cut pine and old nails he carried in a pouch like gold. Mercy carved wooden shutters herself. He built the roof one plank at a time, teaching her to drive each nail with care, not anger. No sign marked it, no fence, just a wide stretch of land, 2 horses they traded for furs and herbs, and a silence that felt sacred, not loneliness, peace. They'd done what the town said they couldn't, they survived. Winter crept back and slow and cold. Mercy chopped wood with her bad leg braced and her shoulders stronger than ever. Her hands cracked, bled, healed again. She sang to the baby now, toddling in a voice still quiet but no longer afraid. He taught her how to trap in snow. She taught him how to make stew out of nearly nothing. They laughed now, even that was new. But not everything was easy. Sometimes she'd wake up gasping, dreaming of hands on her wrists, of cellar walls and cold pews, and men with names she used to trust. He never asked what the dreams were, he just held her. Let her ride the storm without steering, and still he never told her his name. It happened on a Tuesday. Mercy was boiling herbs outside when she heard hoofbeats fast familiar. She stood so, did he one rider, no rifle, no badge, just a man in a blue coat, Union cavalry, but not official. He dismounted without a word and walked toward the cabin with eyes fixed on the Apache. Mercy stepped between them. The man tipped his hat, didn't expect to. "See you here," he said. "Gaze cool." The Apache didn't blink, didn't expect to be followed. Mercy's voice came out sharper than she meant. "Who is he?" The rider looked at her. "Lady, you don't know who you're lying next to." "I know enough." "No, you don't," he said, glancing back at the man behind her. "He walked away from blood, from duty, from us." Mercy's stomach twisted. "You left a war," the rider added, "but the war didn't leave you." The Apache said nothing, just stared. After a long silence, the man spit into the dirt. "You're not done. The past don't let you be." Then he turned and rode off, a shadow cut from the sun. They didn't talk about it for 2 days. Mercy didn't push, but something in her ached, something raw, something familiar. She'd carried her shame for so long, and he'd held it without question. Now his ghost had come calling, and he turned away from them like stone. Until one night, as the fire cracked, he said quietly, "My name was Cale." She looked at him, waited. "I left because war made me a man I didn't want to be, but I can't undo the blood on my hands." She reached for his palm. "It doesn't matter to me, not if you're still trying to build instead of burn." He nodded once, then added, "But they'll come back." "You mean more soldiers?" "No, the past and boots on horses, it always comes back. You've come this far with her. You felt that, didn't you? Subscribe, and I want you to meet someone else tomorrow, someone just as forgotten." The decision came days later, unexpected but clear. A family wandered into their land half-starved. A widow, two boys, a girl too young to speak. Lost after their wagon overturned in the river bend. Mercy took them in without asking. Kyle didn't argue. They fed them, dressed their wounds. And when the snow fell that week, they let them stay. Something changed in that. The cabin wasn't just theirs anymore. It became a refuge. Mercy watched Cale teaching the boys to track deer. She watched the little girl cling to his knee, watched herself start to dream bigger than survival. "We could build another," she said one morning, "another house for others." Cale looked at her, brow furrowed. She went on, "For the ones who've got nowhere to go, the ones with names whispered in town like poison like mine." He smiled, then a rare, slow smile. "You sure know, but I want to try." And so they built not just walls, a place, a ranch, a safe stretch of woods and water, a small community of the outcast and left behind. Not many, just enough. One by one, they came a widower with a burned hand, a half-black girl who'd been run out of two towns, a boy too soft-spoken to belong anywhere else. Mercy taught them how to boil pine sap. Cale taught them how to listen to wind, and always the fire burned. But peace doesn't stay quiet forever. One dusk, riders appeared on the ridge, 5 of them. Town folks, guns on their hips, dust in their wake. The preacher's son rode at the front. He called down, "You think you can hide sinners out here?" Kyle stepped forward. "We don't hide, we live," the boy sneered. "You don't get to build a new world just 'cause the old one didn't want you." Mercy stepped beside Cale, her voice steady. "We didn't ask your permission." A long pause. Then the boy raised his rifle, aiming not at her, but at Cale. That's when Mercy moved faster than she thought she could. She didn't shoot him, she didn't scream. She stood in front of Cale and said loud enough to shake the trees, "You'll have to shoot through me." The boy hesitated, blinked, then lowered his gun just an inch. "This ain't over," he muttered. "Maybe not," she said, "but it's ours now." They never came back. Maybe because they were afraid, maybe because they finally saw what Mercy had become. Not a ghost, not a victim, a fire reborn. That night, as the ranch gathered around the fire, someone asked her, "Do you miss the town?" Mercy looked up at the stars. "No," she said, "I remember it, but I don't miss it." And Cale touched her hand. Together they watched the fire crackle and dance. And in its glow they saw a life no one gave them. One they carved from stone and ash, in silence, one worth fighting for. They came to the edge of Dry Creek at dawn. Cale rode beside her. Their boy slept in a sling against her chest, his tiny fingers curled around a pine needle like a sword. Mercy didn't wear a dress, not the kind they expected, just a thick wool coat. She'd stitched herself a ribbon in her hair and fire in her chest. They didn't come to beg, they came for a name. The town was quieter than she remembered, smaller somehow. The wood of the chapel was warped, the stores shuttered early. The faces, familiar and frightened, peered through windows like the past had come walking. She stopped in front of the chapel and let the silence gather like storm clouds. She waited, and eventually they came. The preacher, his son Eli, a few others older, now bitter in the bones. The preacher spoke first. "You're not welcome here, Mercy. I'm not staying," she replied. "But my son was born under your sky, and he deserves to know where he comes from." Then she turned back to the people who once called her cursed and said, "This boy's name is Elijah. Not because of any of you, but because I took something bitter and made it sweet." They didn't clap, they didn't cheer, but they didn't stop her either. And that was enough. Later that night, back on the ridge, they laid a fire under the B-stars. She could have let the moment pass, could have let silence do the work. But she turned to Cale and said quietly, "I never asked you if you'd stay." He looked at her like she'd grown a second son. "I already did, and that was it. No rings, no chapel, just a promise whispered into the flames. I will walk beside you, and from her lips I will never run from myself again." They didn't kiss under rose petals. They held hands in the snow. They said yes with their shoulders pressed close, and a child sleeping between them. Sometimes the boy asked why they didn't live in town. Mercy would smile and say, "Because towns forget the truth." Then Cale would lift him onto his shoulders and say, "But out here, we remember everything." Years later, people would talk about the woman who disappeared and came back whole, about the cabin that turned into a ranch, about the fire that never went out. She was never a curse. She was someone's miracle all along. Subscribe and let me introduce you to the next miracle tomorrow.